I was working the check-in desk at a hotel in Berlin when an American family walked up to me. The dad looked stressed. He had his phone out and kept showing me the screen. "Your website said check-in is at 1400 hours. It's 2 p.m. right now. Why can't we check in?" I blinked at him. "Sir, 1400 hours is 2 p.m. He stared at me like I'd just spoken backwards. His wife leaned in. "No, 1400 would be like 2 in the afternoon tomorrow, right? Because it's 14 hours from now?" I had to explain that 14 patu on a 24-hour clock is literally just 2 in the afternoon. They didn't believe me at first. The dad pulled up a calculator app and started doing math. This is the kind of real-world disconnect I unpack regularly. If you're interested in the logic gaps we don't even realize we have, subscribe. When he finally figured it out, he just went quiet and checked in without another word. That same week, my coworker told me about a guest who called the front desk at midnight, furious because the radiator is broken and the room is freezing. My coworker went up to check. The radiator was fine. It was set to 21 degrees Celsius. The guest had seen the number 21 and assumed the room was 21 degrees Fahrenheit. That's -6 Celsius. He genuinely thought the hotel was trying to freeze him to death. My coworker explained Celsius to him. The guy responded, "Well, how am I supposed to know that? You should put a sign up or something." There was a sign, right next to the thermostat. It said temperature in Celsius. Another time, I watched an American couple argue with a waiter in Munich because their bill came to 30 euros and they'd left a 5 euro tip. The waiter politely told them the tip was already included in the bill. The couple got defensive. The husband said, "We're not cheap. We know how to tip. This is insulting." The waiter tried to explain that in Germany, service is included. You don't need to tip extra unless the service was exceptional. The wife cut him off. In America, if you don't tip, you're basically stealing from the server. They live off tips, the waiter nodded. Yes, but this is not America. Here, I am paid a full wage. The husband just shook his head and muttered, "This is why Europe doesn't understand customer service." I'm not telling these stories to mock anyone. I'm telling them because they reveal something fascinating. Americans aren't overreacting to foreign logic because they're ignorant. They're overreacting because American systems have taught them that their way is the default. This isn't just content. It's cultural pattern recognition. If that kind of clarity resonates with you, you'll want to be here for what's next. When that default gets challenged, it creates a kind of mental short circuit. And honestly, the rest of the world finds it hilarious. Let me walk you through some of the most absurd, confusing, and genuinely baffling moments I've witnessed. I have a friend who works at a car rental place in London. One day, an American tourist came in to pick up his reserved vehicle. Everything was fine until my friend handed him the keys and said, "You're in spot 12, just outside to the left." The guy walked out, came back 2 minutes later and said, "There's no car in spot 12. My friend went outside with him. The car was right there, spot 12, clear as day. The tourist pointed at the license plate. "That's not my reservation number." My friend was confused. "Sir, the license plate isn't your reservation number. It's the car's registration." The guy got frustrated. "Then how do I know this is my car?" My friend just stared. "Because it's in the spot I told you. And I gave you the keys. And the keys open this car." The logic didn't land. The tourist wanted a sticker or a paper with his name on it. He couldn't wrap his head around the idea that the car was his simply because the rental company said so. It took 15 minutes to convince him to just get in and drive away. That same month, my friend dealt with another American who returned the car with the fuel tank half empty. My friend explained there'd be a refueling charge since the car was supposed to come back full. The customer argued, "But I barely drove it. I only used half a tank." My friend said, "Right, which is why you owe for half a tank of fuel." The guy responded, "But that's not fair. I didn't use a full tank, so why should I pay as if I did?" My friend gave up and just processed the charge. The customer left a 1-star review saying the company scammed him over gasoline. I've also heard stories from train stations. A woman from Texas bought a ticket from Paris to Amsterdam. She got on the train, sat down, and then freaked out when the conductor asked for her ticket. She showed it to him. He looked at it and said, "Madame, this ticket is for tomorrow." She went pale. "What do you mean tomorrow? I bought it today." The conductor explained that the ticket was dated for the next day. She must have selected the wrong date when booking online. She insisted she hadn't. She showed him her phone, where the booking confirmation clearly said the next day's date. She stared at it. Then she said, "Well, I'm already on the train. Can't I just use it now?" The conductor said no. She'd have to buy a new ticket or get off at the next stop. She argued for 10 minutes, saying it was just a piece of paper and the seat's empty anyway. So, what's the difference? The conductor didn't budge. She paid for a new ticket, visibly upset, and spent the rest of the trip typing an angry email on her laptop. Another train story. A guy from California was traveling through Switzerland. He bought a first-class ticket, but sat in second class by mistake. When the conductor came by, the guy showed his ticket. The conductor said, "Sir, this is a first-class ticket. First class is 3 cars forward." The guy looked around. "But there's space here. Does it really matter?" The conductor said, "Yes, it matters. You paid for first class. You should sit there." The guy shrugged. "I'm fine here. I don't need the upgrade." The conductor repeated, "You must sit in first class." The guy got annoyed. "Why? I'm not bothering anyone." The conductor explained that in Switzerland, tickets are tied to specific sections. If he stays in second class with a first-class ticket, it messes up the system for seat reservations. The guy finally moved, but he muttered the whole way about how it's just a train and rules for the sake of rules. I also know someone who works at a pharmacy in Copenhagen. An American tourist came in asking for Tylenol. My friend said, "We don't carry that brand, but we have paracetamol, which is the same thing." The tourist squinted. "What's paracetamol?" My friend explained it's the same active ingredient as Tylenol, just a different name. The tourist didn't believe her. He said, "If it's the same, why isn't it called Tylenol?" My friend said, "Because Tylenol is a brand name. Paracetamol is the actual drug." The guy stood there for a solid 30 seconds, processing. Then he said, "Do you have anything that's actually American?" My friend just handed him the paracetamol. He bought it, but he Googled it on his phone right there in the store to make sure she wasn't lying. One more. A couple from Florida was staying in an Airbnb in Lisbon. They messaged the host at 11 p.m. saying, "We can't figure out how to turn on the heat. It's freezing in here." The host checked the thermostat remotely. It was set to 22 degrees Celsius. The host messaged back, "The heat is on. It's set to a comfortable temperature." The couple responded, 22 degrees is below freezing. We're going to get hypothermia." The host realized they thought it was Fahrenheit. She explained Celsius. The couple didn't apologize. They just said, "You should have specified that in the listing." The listing did specify it. Right under House Rules, it said, "All temperatures in Celsius." They left a 3-star review. I used to work at a tourist information center in Prague. One afternoon, an American woman came in holding a map. She looked stressed. She said, "I'm trying to find the Berlin Wall, but this map doesn't show it." I said, "Ma'am, the Berlin Wall is in Berlin. You're in Prague." She blinked. "Aren't they the same thing?" I shook my head. "No, Prague is in the Czech Republic. Berlin is in Germany. They're different countries." She looked genuinely confused. "But they're both in Europe, right?" I said yes. She asked how far apart they are. I told her about 350 kilometers. She stared at me like I was making it up. Then she asked, "Can I walk there?" I suggested taking a train. She left without saying thank you. That same month, I had a guy ask me where he could see the Eiffel Tower and Big Ben in one day. I told him that's not possible unless he's taking a flight, because Paris and London are in different countries. He said, "Yeah, but Europe is small, right? Can't I just drive?" I explained that driving from Prague to Paris takes about 10 hours, and then from Paris to London requires a ferry or tunnel. He looked annoyed. "I thought Europe was supposed to be easy to travel." I said it is easy, but you still have to account for distance. He muttered something about false advertising and left. Another time, a family came in asking for directions to the castle where Dracula lived. I asked if they meant Bran Castle in Romania. The dad said, "No, the real one. The one from the movie." I gently explained that Dracula is fictional. He was written by an Irish author who never even visited Romania. The dad didn't believe me. He said his wife had read online that Dracula's castle was somewhere in Europe, and they'd assumed it was in Prague because Prague looks like Transylvania. I suggested they visit Prague Castle instead, which is real and very beautiful. They declined. They wanted the Dracula Castle. I never saw them again. I also had a woman ask me why everyone in Prague speaks Austrian. I said, "Ma'am, we speak Czech here. Austria is a different country." She said, "But you're right next to Austria, so shouldn't you speak Austrian?" I explained that Austrians speak German, not Austrian, and that Czech is a separate language. She looked frustrated. "This is so confusing. Why doesn't Europe just pick one language?" I didn't know how to respond to that. My coworker once helped an American tourist who was upset because he couldn't find the Prague Tower. He kept saying, "You know, the tall one, the famous one. It's on all the postcards." My coworker asked if he meant the Eiffel Tower. The guy said, "Yeah, that one." "Where is it?" My coworker said, "Sir, that's in Paris." The guy got defensive. Well, how was I supposed to know? They're both in Europe. He genuinely didn't understand why a landmark in France wouldn't be in the Czech Republic. I've also had people ask if they need a passport to travel from Prague to Vienna. I always say yes, because even though both are in the Schengen zone and there are no border checks, it's still international travel. But some people get upset. One guy said, "That's ridiculous. It's only a few hours by train. Why would I need a passport?" I explained that countries have borders. He said, "Yeah, but it's all Europe." I said, "Europe isn't a country." He paused. Then he said, "Well, it should be." Another American asked me if people in Prague use euros. I said, "No, we use Czech crowns." She said, "But I thought all of Europe uses euros." I explained that only some countries use euros. The Czech Republic has its own currency. She looked annoyed. "That's so inconvenient. Why don't you just switch?" I told her it's a complicated economic decision. She said, "It's not that complicated. Just use the same money as everyone else." She left to find an ATM and came back 20 minutes later, confused because the machine gave her crowns instead of euros. One of my favorite stories involves a man who asked me how to get to Czechoslovakia. I said, "Sir, Czechoslovakia doesn't exist anymore. It split into the Czech Republic and Slovakia in 1993. He said, "What do you mean it doesn't exist?" I explained the country peacefully dissolved over 30 years ago. He said, "Well, that's not what my guidebook says." I asked when the guidebook was published. He checked. It was from 1987. I suggested he get a newer one. He said, "Why? The castles and churches haven't moved." Technically, he was right. But still, I also once had a tourist ask if Prague was part of Russia. I said no. She asked, "But you were part of Russia before, right?" I explained that Czechoslovakia was part of the Soviet sphere of influence during the Cold War, but it was never part of Russia itself. She said, "Same thing, though." I said it really wasn't. She shrugged and walked away. Last one. A couple asked me for a restaurant recommendation that serves traditional European food. I asked what kind. Italian? French? German? Czech? The husband said, "Just, European food." I said Europe has dozens of countries with different cuisines. He looked frustrated. "Can't you just recommend something normal?" I recommended a traditional Czech restaurant. They came back the next day and said the food was too weird. They'd expected something more like Olive Garden. I have a cousin who manages an apartment building in Stockholm. She once had an American tenant complain that the washing machines don't work. My cousin went to check. The machines were fine. The tenant just didn't understand the cycles. In Sweden, washing machines have long cycles. Some take 2 or 3 hours. The tenant had started a load, checked 20 minutes later, and found it still running. She assumed it was broken. She tried 3 different machines. All of them broke. My cousin explained the cycles. The tenant said, "Why would anyone wait 3 hours for laundry?" My cousin said, "Because it cleans the clothes better and uses less water." The tenant didn't care. She said it was a waste of time and asked if there was a laundromat nearby with normal American machines. Another story from my cousin. An American tenant called her at midnight, panicking because someone is trying to break into the apartment. My cousin rushed over. No one was breaking in. The tenant had heard footsteps in the hallway. My cousin explained that other people live in the building. The tenant said, "But it's midnight. Why are they walking around?" My cousin said, "Because they live here. People come and go at different times." The tenant said, "In America, if someone is walking around at midnight, it's suspicious." My cousin didn't know what to say to that. I also know someone who worked at a grocery store in Amsterdam. An American customer asked where the peanut butter was. My friend pointed to the shelf. The customer looked at the jars and said, "These are tiny. Don't you have normal-sized ones?" The jars were standard European size, about 250 grams. The customer wanted a jar like the ones in America, which are closer to a kilogram. My friend said they don't carry jars that large. The customer said, "How do you survive?" My friend just smiled politely. That same customer also complained that the bread goes bad too fast. My friend explained that European bread doesn't have as many preservatives, so it stays fresh for a shorter time. The customer said, "That's inefficient. Why not just add preservatives?" My friend said, "Because people prefer fresh bread." The customer said, "But it's wasteful. They went in circles for 5 minutes." I've also heard about an American student in Barcelona who got into an argument with his landlord over quiet hours. The ACTU building had a rule: no loud noise between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. The student said that was unreasonable because he liked to watch TV and play video games late at night. V2. Landlord explained that other tenants have works and school in the morning. The student said, "So? I have headphones." The landlord said, "Then use them." The student said, "I shouldn't have to. It's my apartment." The landlord reminded him that it's a shared building. The student didn't care. He kept making noise. The landlord eventually didn't renew his lease. Another story. A woman from New York was staying in a hotel in Vienna. She called the front desk and said, "The TV only has foreign channels. Can you switch it to English?" The front desk explained that Austrian TV is in German, but there are a few international news channels in English. The woman said, "No, I want regular TV, like NBC or ABC. The front desk said, "Ma'am, those are American channels. They don't broadcast in Austria." The woman said, "Can't you just change the settings?" The front desk gave up and offered her a streaming service login. She declined because it's not the same. I've also heard about an American who moved to Norway for work. He was shocked that most stores close at 6 p.m. on weekdays and aren't open on Sundays. He complained to his coworkers, saying, "How is anyone supposed to shop?" His coworkers said, "You shop during the week before 6, or on Saturdays." He said, "But what if I work until 6? They said, "Then you shop on Saturday?" He said, "But what if I'm busy on Saturday?" They just shrugged. He eventually adjusted, but he never stopped complaining about it. Another one, a tourist in Germany asked a waiter for free refills on his soda. The waiter said they don't do free refills. The tourist said, "What do you mean? Every restaurant does free refills," the waiter said. "Not in Europe." The tourist said, "That's a scam." The waiter explained that drinks are priced individually because free refills would raise the base price of meals. The tourist didn't care. He left a bad review saying the restaurant was cheap. I also know someone who works at a gym in Brussels. An American member asked why there's no air conditioning. My friend explained that most European gyms don't have AC because the climate doesn't require it year-round. The member said, "But it's hot in here." My friend said, "It's a gym. You're exercising.